If you've been using Blender for any length of time, you might have noticed how annoying it is to get a proper circular array happening. So before geometry nodes happened, there was one way to do it as far as I'm aware, and that was by using an array modifier and an empty. So you have to add an array modifier, say you want like, I don't know, 6 of them. Take away the relative offset, you want to do an object offset and select this empty here. And now you see they're all in the line, but you want it to be rotating around the center point. But in order for that, you have to have the object origin at the center, or wherever the empty is. So in my case, it's just 3D cursor. And then you rotate around the z-axis, and then you have your circular array. But then you got to do math to make sure they're exactly, divided by the 360 degrees, divided by whatever number that you have in the array modifier. So it's super annoying to me. And then even when you do that, they're all facing the same direction, And if you wanted to change the direction, you have to go and rotate it in here, but then they're still all facing the same direction. So you'd have to apply it and then rotate them all randomly. It was just a big annoying mess, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So we're not going to do it that way. Because of the advent of geometry nodes, there's a much easier way to do it. And I've actually created a fun little, I guess it's a modifier out of geometry nodes. So I've already appended it into my scene. So first thing I'm going to do is create a new mesh, and it's just going to be a plane because it doesn't really matter what it is. So let me switch off all my unnecessary things. Let's get a geometry nodes modifier. I've already brought in my circular array that I have created, and you can see that nothing is here. Well, because we have to instance the object. So I'm going to select Suzanne. And you can see what I have here is a fun array of Suzannes. Now, I can edit this. I can bring down the number of objects. I can bring down the object scale. Oh, one thing that's happening here is my Suzanne, her location is still at the center. So I'm just going to say origin to geometry. There we go. That's more like it. Okay, so you can see here I can change the object scale. And I can change the array radius. I can change, how wide it is or how long it is. Let's just change all this to 1. Back to where we were. Yeah, so this, if I set this to 1 here, it's the exact same size as they started out as. But we also have, I have some controls for uniform rotation. So if I want them to be facing all the same direction, we can do that. There's an influence there. I can change their rotation on the x-axis or the y-axis or the z-axis. And I can also add in some random rotation on all 3 axes. Axes. So yeah, there's a lot of great options for whatever you want. There's also a random rotation seed for if you have actually some random rotation in here. You can change that up a little bit. So, how do we do this? Well, let me just show you how it works. I open up a geometry node editor. I have my circular array going on. All right, so the most important thing, I guess the first thing you're going to want to take note of, is that it uses a circle. So this is using a newer build of Blender 2.93, where it has the mesh primitives that you can bring in. So I just brought in a simple circle. And with the fill type none, and the vertices are controlled by this slider here, which says number of objects. Let's see if I can click on. Yeah, so I got instance objects collection, number of objects. Okay, so you can see all the controls that we have here that I have edited and set up special minimums and maximums for each of these things. Yeah, so we got our circle. Then we got to transform scale for the x and the y, so that we can change the array scale, the x and the y here. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility there. All this is designed to basically be the last circular array that you'll ever have to make. So that's what I designed it for. That was the purpose I designed it for, and I think it does a pretty good job of incorporating everything that I could think of that you would need to do. I was kind of thinking of things like if you were doing nuts on a car wheel, a car hubcap. and you wanted to array some nuts around, and you wanted them to have different rotations and be random and stuff. That's kind of what I thought of as I was making this. So the next thing you do is you got to assign rotation to vector. That's what makes them all face the same direction. Because if they're not, that's what makes them face around the circle, you know, different directions. Otherwise, they'll just be facing the same direction. And the influence of that is this factor, which I have here, which changes it to uniform rotation. So if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be able to have that control. So it's set to X. Pivot is auto, factor float, vector is attribute, and you make that position. That's very important, or else it will not work. I'm not really sure why it's positioned in our rotation, but I'm an amateur at geometry notes. I have no idea what I'm doing. So some of this actually was put together based on a couple tutorials I found on YouTube, just to get the very basic concept, and then I added a whole bunch of stuff onto it to make it do what I wanted it to do, essentially. Yeah, so I guess I forgot to mention the number of objects is basically changing the number of vertices in this circle here. So that's the way you get the amount that you want. And I think the lowest limit is 3, because you can't get a circle of less than 3. So, I mean, it's really more of a triangle at that point. But anyway, I digress. All right, so then once you get your align rotation to vector, that aligns your points in a certain rotation. Then you got your attribute vector math node, and you add that. It's an attribute vector, so you add rotation to this enables you to change the rotation X, Y, and Z. These guys here, just if you want to rotate them all uniformly, or just add an amount of rotation to any of the axes for whatever reason. You can do this also after you have the random rotations, just add a little bit more extra randomness. And then you got here an attribute randomize, which is what gives you the options for all the random X, Y, and Z rotation. And you plug, so you plug the attribute vector math, which just is an added amount of rotation into the randomize. The randomize goes on top of that, essentially. And I've got a combine X, Y, Z node here, and it basically, I was kind of muddling my way through it. I wasn't really sure what I was doing here, but this might not be the greatest, most efficient way to do it. But I've just got 3 add nodes here, and I got just to get a value. This probably isn't even necessary, I don't think. Maybe not. I don't know. I told you, I've just muddled my way through this, so if I change the rotation, yeah, it still works. So I guess those probably weren't necessary at all. I was just trying to figure out a way to get some kind of value control out of it. So, regardless, this we got here controls for the regular rotation, and these are the controls here for the random rotation. So they come afterward. And we got a seed here, which is also controlled down here. That's the randomized rotation seed. And we got an attribute fill, which we plug our attribute randomize into, and we change the scale. And that is controlling the overall object's scale. You see it's plugged into this object's scale part right here. And yeah, that's just a simple operation added on top of everything, just so you can adjust that after the fact, so you don't have to go into the object itself and change the scale, because that's just absurd and ridiculous. All right, and then finally, we've got a point instance node for the object and a point instance node for a collection. Personally, I think working with object works best, because if it's collection, it has to be located in the center of your scene, or else it'll just screw up all the locations of everything. I guess I can show you that right now, actually. So you see where my original Suzanne is. I can move that into a new collection. Sure, let's just call it collection 2, whatever. And now if I were to change this and say, oh, instead of using Suzanne, I want to use collection 2. And then I would have to say, well, I guess it's, if it was composed of more than one object, I suppose. Let me just duplicate that and put it over here. It wouldn't instance the collection the way you would expect. So if I say whole collection, wow, I mean, this can be cool, sure, but it just screws everything up, if you ask me, because it offsets it by the same amount, you know, as if, I think it's basing it around the center of the scene. So the point is, that's not what you would want in this particular case. Or I guess in this particular case it wouldn't matter. But in most cases, if you have a collection with like a multi-object like a column that has multiple sections to it, it wouldn't work. So I just have that option just in case you would want to use it. Yeah, so let's just get rid of that and close that out. The other great thing about this method is if you change the collection's visibility, it does not affect the visibility of your new instances here in the geometry nodes, which is a problem using dupliverts in regular methods. So I actually had a project that I converted all of my dupliverts to geometry nodes instances because I wanted to be able to do that. So anyway, you've got an option for point instance object, point instance collection, and it joins them at the end, and then you got your output. So I think this was a fun exercise in creating a circular array effect with all the options that I think would be necessary, and very customizable. Whatever you want. It's just fantastic. Just fantastic. So yeah, you can see it's just all based on just this geometry of a circle that it procedurally generates for you. And it's fantastic. I love geometry nodes. It's so flexible. And you will notice I only have 507 vertices. Despite the fact that I have a whole load of objects here, no matter how many I add, I still only have 507 vertices because of the way geometry nodes instances. If I were to use a real array modifier, that would just be going up as I add more objects, and it would be slowing down my computer probably. Well, maybe not for this model, but if you were doing any kind of complicated model. So yeah, that's a quick walkthrough of my new circular array geometry nodes. I hope you were able to learn something from it. Oh yeah, I guess I should tell you about this map range that's plugged into the uniform rotation. I reversed it essentially. It was going from 0 to 1, and I wanted it to be from 1 to 0. So I could say uniform rotation 1. That's basically a yes on the uniform rotation, which means they're all facing the same direction. Otherwise, they're just facing around the circle as they go because of the align rotation to vector. So other than that, I think that's it. It's not super complicated, but it took me a little while to fumble my way through it because I don't know what I'm doing. But I hope you were able to get something out of it, and hopefully you can use something like this in your future projects.